Hello and welcome to the TRADOC Leader Professional Development Program. This is the program's introductory webinar. Our series to begin this fiscal year is Diversity and Inclusion. We appreciate very much the efforts of Ms. Sarah Burkaw, TRADOC's Diversity Director, who's been instrumental in preparing for this series. Helping us kick off the program today is TRADOC's Command Leadership Team of General Paul E. Funk II, Commanding General, and Command Sergeant Major Daniel J. Hendrex. My name is Jim Heft. I work in TRADOC's Communication Directorate and will be moderating. So, what is leader professional development anyway? While it may be intuitive, the LPD program is intended to educate the Army workforce on driving cultural change, developing people of character, and promoting inclusion. Even though our fiscal year 21 theme is diversity and inclusion, some of our upcoming sessions may highlight other contemporary topics of importance and interest. And while today's webinar is only 30 minutes, remember it's just introductory, future sessions will be held monthly for an hour and feature a variety of guest speakers and topics. Now, we appreciate you watching this webinar either on the Command's Facebook page or TRADOC's website on the watch page. As we proceed through the webinar today and in the future, please feel free to leave a comment and have a conversation, but please keep your comments professional and pertinent. You know this. For this webinar, we asked for audience questions in advance. However, we got over 60 of them. We fully expect for future sessions that questions will be taken live, but if we don't get to all of those 60 questions today, we will answer them in the coming weeks over TRADOC's social media. Additionally, these sessions are meant to be a shared learning experience and interactive, as well as set the stage for opportunities for leader engagement and team building wherever you're serving. Now, we're in a unique environment with Command Sergeant Major Hendrex and myself here in the studio, and General Funk on travel joining us via Microsoft Teams. This is a fantastic example that we can leverage technology to do mission command. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the 17th Commanding General of TRADOC, General Funk. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Hey, my name's Funk, and I'm an American soldier, and I'm proud to be a TRADOC warrior and leading this great team. I'm joined today by my battle buddy, great friend, and brand new Command Sergeant Major Dan Hendrex, and we're thrilled to finally reinvigorate the TRADOC Leader Development Program. Just like the weekly TCP live events that I hope you've all been attending virtually, this program is a chance for you to hear directly from us. It's a chance for you to come together to talk about tough topics like diversity, inclusion, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and suicide prevention, the big three as they're referred to these days. But it's also a chance to learn about our profession and drive cultural change. As Jim said, the theme for FY21 program is diversity and inclusion. The strength of our Army comes from our diversity. It is the source of our power. Diversity is a weapon system to be used for good. And people, as you all know, are our asymmetric advantage. They're the center of gravity. So let's take a team approach. And let's use diversity and inclusion to be integral to everything we do. You know, the Chief of Staff says the big three of sexual assault, sexual harassment, suicide, racism, and extremism have no place in our Army. And we must eliminate these corrosive behaviors now. Part of that solution is Project Inclusion, which is the Army's holistic effort to get after this. It gives a voice to everyone in our squad. Our program will give us the opportunity to be better understand how to be inclusive leaders. Leading this effort with me at TRADOC is my great friend and battle buddy, Command Sergeant Major Dan Hendrex. He's a proven warrior, a scholar, and we're lucky to get him on our squad. And I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce him and to let him talk to the TRADOC team. Over to you, Sergeant Major Hendrex.
Sir, thank you very much. Hey team, great to be a part of the TRADOC enterprise and great to be here in this discussion today. As we like to call these, there are honestly going to be some very uncomfortable discussions as we move forward with this. And I would just tell you this has been an uncomfortable year. From day one, when I was in Iraq watching the United States Embassy get attacked and Molotov cocktails coming across, watching our U.S. soldiers have tactical ballistic missiles coming down on them in Iraq, was not the way I wanted to start the new year off. And then this magical thing called COVID landed on top of us and has really kind of stressed the system, not only for the U.S. Army, but I would just tell you for the globe. And so as I've been in TRADOC now for a whopping 30 days, I would tell you I'm still in phase 1 of my ignorance reduction campaign, and I appreciate the senior leaders out there and the young soldiers are kind of helping me understand this enterprise that is truly impressive. Matter of fact, got in about 1 o'clock this morning just to make sure we got here, got back from Fort Jackson and have seen some incredible things. What I will tell you is, I think most senior leaders today have spent the last 15 years focused on our adversary, and that adversary came in the form of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, depend on where you're deployed, but that is where we have focused our efforts on fighting and winning our nation's wars. Today, I don't think that's our priority. Matter of fact, as you look at the adversary we face today, it's not some dragon across the sea or in the ocean, it is right next to you. It is a senior leader, a peer, that young soldier coming in, dealing with things such as suicide ideation, sexual assault, and extremism and racism. And so those corrosive behaviors are undermining our profession and are the greatest risk that I think most of us see that will undermine us going forward today. And so I'm incredibly happy that General Funk is leading this effort within TRADOC, not only for TRADOC, but what we'll talk a bit about today is TRADOC's role as we go forward in supporting the integration of these efforts throughout the entire Army.
Sergeant Major, it's absolutely fantastic to have you here on TRADOC's team. Obviously, you've hit the ground running here your first 30 days, but talk a little bit more about these first 30 days. What have you seen? How has TRADOC met your expectations, things of that nature?
Sir, what I'll tell you is very surprising. It is a vast enterprise, one of which that I am really just trying to get my arms wrapped around, but we got some great leaders that have been helping me through that. And probably more importantly, I think as I've really witnessed and understand now is, taking a young kid, right, straight out of high school, and I've just met several of them over the last couple of weeks, watching that process of them raising their hand, doing something different, greater than themselves, coming in as a civilian with long hair and a goatee, and then really transitioning through that process to basic training, to OSET, to AIT, and then ultimately as we kind of help them through the process to their first unit of assignment. And that is an incredibly powerful process and not an easy one to kind of navigate. So we have to understand the kids coming in today, they are coming from a completely different vantage point than I think most of us today. And so as we talk about what we're seeing outside the gates, these young kids are coming in trying to figure out how am I a soldier, but how do I get involved with some of these social issues? How do I have my voice heard? And I think a little bit of that today is what we're going to talk about, and more importantly, give them a pathway so their voices are heard.
Absolutely, and we were thrilled to receive over 60 questions here over social media for this particular webinar, this introductory webinar. Again, we're just introducing this topic that we're going to cover over the series of diversity inclusion. But let's stop me talking, let's get right to it, get to our first question, and General, we'll have you answer this. What does the Army look like with a diverse and inclusive workforce? How does this help us become, as we say, victory starts here at TRADOC, how does this help us become victorious in the battlefield? So General, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's a great question. And by the way, that's an incredibly snappy tie you have on there. So we should talk about that a little while later as well. But let me just say that, I think that the diverse workforce in the Army, from the civilians all the way to the uniformed personnel, is a kaleidoscope of colors. It is, in fact, the diversity that is our strength, as I said before. What is common is the name tag we wear and the uniform that allows us to determine what is reflected around the globe as hope and fear. This uniform means hope to those around us that need a helping hand, those that have been put down by a dictator or some sort of despot, those that have been impacted by some sort of natural disaster. And then it means fear to our adversaries and our enemies. And what we have to do is remember that this says U.S. Army on it. We are all part of an inclusive, diverse team. We wear the cloth of our great nation across the globe and around the world 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. As we look to be more inclusive, we've got to understand that each other's differences are our strengths. We've got to understand that those corrosive behaviors that we have must be stamped out. And they must start from the squad all the way up to the 4-star general level, to the ACOM level. That's what it looks like. In my opinion, people's values and our Army values need to collide so that we can, in fact, have a common sense of purpose and goals. And that's what a profession really is all about. So I'll push it back to you there, Jim, but that's what I would say.
Absolutely. You know, historically, we've seen armies that have not been diverse lose and lose badly. You know, the National Socialists come to mind. Imperial Japan comes to mind. So, Sergeant Major, how does diversity make the Army more lethal in order to get after it and fight and win our nation's wars?
So, and maybe I might date myself here, but as a brand new private coming in the United States Army, my first field problem was the Gulf War, right? So first thing I ever did was found myself out on a tank in the middle of the desert, very confused because I really thought I was coming in for college money, but that's how it all started. But what's interesting is from that to now, we've made some great strides, but we also have some gaps. And so what do I mean by that? Great strides. What I never saw in those days that, matter of fact, happened when I was a brigade CSM, running through the motor pool with my brigade commander, just dramatically came to a stop and looked up on one of the tanks. And I was just, it caught me off guard to the point that I had to tell the brigade commander, hey, do you understand what you're looking at? And what is it? It was 2 female mechanics, sleeves rolled up, engine was removed, and they were fixing that tank. And it seems like, well, what's so dramatic about that? 24 years of service, and I've never seen that, right? And it was a moment of pride that I would just tell you was long overdue, and you're starting to see the efforts of kind of getting gender throughout all our MOSs across the formation. During the Gulf War, as I described, my company commander, Captain Williams. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but he was black. OIF 1, my lieutenant, Lieutenant Orlick Wilkins. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. Lieutenant Orlick Wilkins looked a lot like Urkel and had a financial background. And I really kind of asked him, I'm like, sir, why did you join the Army? He goes, well, I was a platoon sergeant at the time, sergeant first class during OIF 1, and he said, well, it was a bet. I wanted to join the Army. I was a financial wizard. He was working on Wall Street, and he wanted to do something more after 9/11. So I thought I was starting off on the wrong foot, but what I will tell you, and we'll talk about this a lot today, he had an incredible ability to build trust with his organization at the individual level that platoon, to include myself, would have done anything for him. And it was beyond just trust. It came down to love. And so he was willing to put his life on the line and had done it several times. I got put in for 3 Purple Hearts that tour. But what every soldier in that platoon knew is that they would follow him anywhere because they knew he was committed in the same way. I give both those vignettes because they were both minority leaders that I didn't even think about. And so today, in combat arms, where are those minority leaders? I think we got to take a hard look at that to make sure that we're given, equal opportunities across our formation in that reference.
So we know in the Army that we like to measure things, and we like to have metrics and what have you. And so I'm wondering right now, what in particular is TRADOC doing to address diversity and inclusion, and how will the command's objectives, what are the command's objectives with respect to diversity and inclusion? How are we going to measure it? Do you, I know you've only been here 30 days, but do you have some thoughts on this?
I do. And so I think it's two parts. I think part one, that there's a TRADOC internal piece, but there's also TRADOC's responsibility as the integrator, right, for leader development, for professional military education, and it's really an Army focus. So I would just say I think the CG is heading in the right direction, whereas we look at the people strategy for the Army, that he is the driving force for ensuring we integrate, inclusion and diversity for the Army, not just for TRADOC. And with that being said, we also have these efforts that we are working internal to TRADOC that gives us an ability to create some incredible products. So whether they're, YouTube videos or products to help, our own leaders kind of get after these uncomfortable conversations and have an important dialogue, very, very important. And I'll just tell you, as we get into these programs, if you're doing anything along the lines with a PowerPoint that's behind you and you're talking to large groups and swaths of people about this, then you're absolutely wrong. You've missed the mark, because these are very personal, and they become really powerful when you get in that confined environment with your team,
Definitely.
with your squad.
Teams, this is my squad for sure. General Funk, your thoughts on what TRADOC is doing regarding diversity and inclusion specifically?
Well, actually, we took an annex. We are involved, not only involved, committed to helping write the annex that is going to be the people's strategy on diversity and inclusion. And what we're going to do is put some metrics in there. These metrics will involve, in fact, I don't know that you can measure it as much as you can make sure that it reflects society. And I think that's the right measure. And then from there is, how are we mentoring people to make them stay part of our teams? And that's where I think we've got to maintain our diversity and inclusion. We've got to keep people in. We got to make them want to be part of our team. We want them to trust us. And then you build trust both ways, by the way, lower to higher and higher to lower. And trust is one of the integral pieces of this. So as we measure that, it can be by how well we are taking care of our people, and how well we have reflect the diversity of our society. So that's what I think. I'll tell you that as we're working through the metrics right now with the building, so I think this plan will be out in a couple of weeks, and once it's out, we'll be able to measure it throughout the programs.
Now, a few weeks ago, when I learned that I was going to end up being the moderator here for this program, number one, I was extremely excited about it. But then, the thought started crossing my mind that, okay, there is some diversity here. I'm a former Navy guy, former sailor, retired. We got a 4-star general there, and we've got a senior enlisted leader here. So, we've had experiences across the globe that have been different. I'm a Yankee, and you guys are from different parts of the country. So there's diversity there, but let's be honest. Everybody watching here realizes that we're all white guys. We're all white men. And so that question has also come up in the course of us asking about this webinar, what people would like to hear about. And I guess the question is how should people receive our comments today? What does diversity mean coming from us? And in general, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so I'm very self-aware of the fact that, yes, I am a white 4-star general and an Army brat. So I'm categorized in a couple of ways. So I've been in the Army for 58 years. So let's broaden the discussion a little bit. Okay, so 0.04% of the people in America serve in uniform. That makes us diverse to begin with. We become professionals. We are, in fact, the standard bearer for what a profession should exude. So I am very much aware that we have some self-awareness to do on our biases and our programs for inclusion. And I'm open enough and believe that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you ought to use them in proportion. And I think that the way we work through this piece is to recognize that we're all American soldiers first. And then from there, actually become, harness the diversity that we have across our great formations. So that's kind of where I am on this. We're already part of an incredible diverse organization, and we're also very much looked at as a small piece of society. So we are, in fact, valued across the world.
Yeah. And what's fantastic, again, just to remind everyone, is this is an introductory webinar. Think of this as a series. So yes, you're getting an introduction to diversity and inclusion by this panel today, but as we go through the next 6, 7, how many long we're going to be having on diversity and inclusion, you're going to see many different people talking about diversity and inclusion. And your thoughts, Sergeant Major?
No, it's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it out front. Right, it is the 800-pound gorilla as we talk about inclusion and diversity, as we have 3 kind of white guys sitting here doing that. So it gets to a mindset, and I think what senior NCOs do for you is they spend a significant amount of time at the operational level, and they bring that perspective into the discussion. And so my framework is really about the crucible of combat, right? So when you come into combat arms, it's what it's designed for, and over the span of the last 30 years, I've had significant deployments, fighting against those adversaries in the United States. And so I would just personally tell you, when I look at leaders, when I say leaders, I'm primarily talking my officer corps, whether it's a platoon leader, a company commander, a battalion, brigade, I do not care about color or gender. I am solely focused on one thing. And matter of fact, I'll overlook a whole lot of other kind of gaps because I'm looking at competence. Why? Because that's the life of myself and my soldiers whose lives are on the line every day. And so that always overrides everything as I have gone up. And so as I talked about Lieutenant Orlick Wilkins, I never put it in that framework because his competence outshone everything else. And the same with Captain Williams, my first commander in the Army. And so as we go forward, and I think General Funk hit it on the head, how do we make sure that there are equitable opportunities and that we are actively pursuing our minority officers to stay in the Army as they continue to move up. And then I'll tell you, I think that also crosses over into our civilian population, because you'll start to see some very similar trends as they move up as well, to where it gets heavily dominated based on, I think 70% of our GS population comes in ex-military. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see that as well, and it's really good to see a renewed focus on those issues to make sure we're really trying to make change in the Army.
So, General, who is responsible for diversity and inclusion, for ensuring that these objectives are met? I'm presuming it's probably you to start, but outside of yourself, who would you say is responsible for D&I?
Well, frankly, it's all of us. At TRADOC, we own the accessions enterprise, so we have to be looking for those opportunities to find talent wherever it is. And as we grow and look and get out and what we call in the recruiting world is prospect, we got to look and make sure we have a diverse lens as we look across the spectrum for that. But we're all responsible for diversity. Once we acquire the talent, we're all responsible then to mentor and keep people in. So that's exactly what we got to be able to do.
Sergeant Major?
Yeah, so everyone.
Right.
Absolutely, it's everyone's responsibility to look at this effort. And then more importantly, when you see it's gone askew, when you're seeing things that you fundamentally know are wrong, it is your responsibility to speak up, to say something, to not let that go by. Non-commissioned officers are taught in the very early days of being an NCO, getting after little things that you see. Don't ever walk by a problem, right? So on-the-spot corrections. And so I know it's a lot deeper than that, but those are some of the big issues that we see. And I would tell you that were really interesting to see when, matter of fact, I was just at Fort Jackson. And this brand new private who had just come in had a really rough start to his military career. So came in, went into kind of a 2-week yellow phase where we keep them separated, and it's really about the COVID strategy, which is not easy, by the way. Next thing you know, his buddy comes down COVID positive. So then he gets separated again. So now he's under quarantine. And next thing you know, he comes down COVID positive. So he literally spends 5, almost 6 weeks in this kind of do loop of not even getting to start, his journey into the military. And so he struggled with that. He struggled with it a lot. A young, kind of tall, lanky, Caucasian kid from the South. And as he's going through that, finally gets into basic training and is working his way through that, walks into a bathroom, and he comes upon one of his peers about to attempt to commit suicide by hanging himself. And so he kind of starts working through the process of talking him down, taking the belt from him, getting leadership involved. And so I had the opportunity to speak with him. I actually had the opportunity to speak with the soldier that had attempted suicide, and then the drill sergeant who also became critical to this scenario. And so as he received help, it was interesting, his perspective now. And so tying in the family to these kind of significant issues was very important. The drill sergeant, what I like to call, the visual of, taking off the brown round, taking off the hat, and speaking to folks as an individual, maintaining standards and discipline, but being an engaged leader had a huge effect. And so this young kid talked very positively about that. And what was really interesting about it is we reached out to the family yesterday. We promoted this brand new private in reference to that was the thing we're looking for, his own resiliency, and then looking out for your battle buddy. And then probably even more importantly, they reached out to his family today just to tell him how proud we were of him.
Well, sir, you mentioned my snappy tie there earlier. I'm wearing yellow for Suicide Prevention Month today, and we have the We Care app available for folks that they can download either on Android through Google Play or through Apple through the iPhone. And that's got your resources, your local resources and national resources for suicide prevention. So hopefully folks will go do that. We're at the end. I had a bet with the Sergeant Major that we could get to 5, and obviously I owe him money now, so that's not going to happen. But General Funk, you have some real quick closing comments?
I absolutely do. First of all, thanks everybody, and remember this is just the intro. And just to let you know that we are listening, even if it's in digital form, to guest 4997, we're going to get after the Army Combat Fitness Test. What we got to do is not freak out, but work out. And then from there, we'll learn and we'll adjust as we go. So let's be part of the positive trend towards changing the culture of fitness in our Army. And let's get out and get after it. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Final thought?
Final thought. Look, first and foremost, great to be part of this team, sir, and really reaching out as we look forward to moving this forward. I'm not a fan of this format because it is all about kind of getting in folks' face, talking to them, sitting down, and having real conversations. So the boss and I both look forward to coming out and seeing you, but more importantly, you have the ability to do that right now in your own formations, so we look forward to supporting you.
All right, well, folks, that's all the time we have for questions, obviously. Thanks again, General Funk, Command Sergeant Major Hendrex. It's great. It was a fantastic discussion. Obviously, a lot got covered. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone on the web did as well. So thank you very much for your time. For everybody watching, put these ideas that you heard here today into practice, and be sure to tune in next time for a deep dive on talent management with Lieutenant General retired Thomas Bostic. That's going to be great. Join us October 22nd at 1100 Eastern, either on Facebook or the TRADOC website. Come prepared with your questions. Until then, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for watching. Remember, victory starts here.